Time is running out on New York Giants quarterback Daniel Jones's day as a starter. Where has it all gone wrong for him in year 6? We'll talk about that and more coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. And welcome in to my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, nothing new here, folks. You know, time's running out on Daniel Jones as the starter. I think we can all agree on that. Even the most ardent of Daniel Jones supporters, that year 6 just isn't working out. So what I'm going to do on today's show is I thought it would be neat to kind of go back and take a look at 2022 to see what Jones was doing in 2022, statistically speaking, versus what's going on now in 2024, supposedly with a better supporting cast around him. So we'll look at that up first. Then we're going to take a look at some of the signs that even the Giants are starting to divorce themselves, if you will, or separate, I should say, from Daniel Jones. There's been little subtle signs that have been coming out that I think we need to talk about. And then finally, what is the right time to bench Daniel Jones, who of course has the $23 million injury guarantee in his contract if he cannot pass the physical in next spring. So we'll take a look at all that on today's show. Again, welcome on into everybody. Let's start off with Daniel Jones today versus Daniel Jones 2022. Now, remember, 2022 was the first year of Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. And their objective at the time was, okay, Daniel Jones had gone through a lot. He had gone through, poor supporting casts. He had gone through different systems. He had gone through injuries. So rather than just chuck him aside, they said, okay, we're going to give this kid a chance. We're not going to pick up the option year of his rookie deal, but we're going to give him a chance and see what he can bring to the table. And we all know what happened. Daniel Jones had a good year in 2022, probably his best year since his rookie season in 2019. The Giants went to the playoffs. The Giants won a playoff game, first playoff game they won since 2011, the 2011 postseason. And all looked well. And because of everything falling into place, the Giants went and they signed Daniel Jones to that 4-year, $160 million contract. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, with that contract, they left themselves with an out just in case, Daniel Jones's 2022 season was a one-hit wonder, which in retrospect, it has been. So 2023, we'll throw that year out because, Daniel had the season-ending knee injury, I think 9 games into the season. He also missed 3 games prior with a neck injury. So I think he only played 6 games that year. But let's take a look at his numbers this year, supposedly with a better offensive line, with a number 1 receiver, Malik Neighbors, and with Brian Daboll, the architect of that offense, calling the plays. All right. So I have some stats for you on that. These are from Pro Football Focus. All right. So 2022, the deep ball, which has been a big problem for Daniel Jones this year. In 2022, Daniel Jones went 10 of 26 on pass attempts of 20 plus yards. That's a 38.5% completion rate. And he had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Not too bad, encouraging. And again, that was without a true number 1 receiver. This year, through 8 games, Daniel is 7 of 28, which is about a 25% completion rate, and he has 1 interception. So something dropped off in the deep ball. And, we watch him throw the deep ball, and a lot of times the receiver either has to slow down his route to catch it, which allows for a defender to come in and limit the yak, or Daniel's just flat out missing the guy, whether he's overthrowing them, underthrowing him, whatever the case might be. There's just no anticipation in his game, and it's showing up especially in the deep pass. All right, let's talk about pressures. All right, in 2024, this year, Daniel Jones, according to Pro Football Focus, is allowed 18.2% of the pressures against him are his fault, his doing, because he's either holding on to the ball too long or he's not running away from the pressure. That is the fourth highest percentage amongst quarterbacks with a minimum of 75 dropbacks. All right. That is also up from the 16.3 that he had in 2022. All right. So Jones is trending in the wrong direction in some of these key numbers. Now, let me also mention a couple of other things that I've noticed that I think are playing a big difference in Daniel Jones's 2024 season versus that 2022 season. Ever since he came back from the ACL, all right, the ACL is healed. However, the team has not been calling as many design runs for him. All right, there have been 53 design runs called for Daniel Jones so far this season. He's averaging 3.5 yards per run. In 2022, they called 144 design runs, averaging 5.6 yards per carry. Okay, so that's a big difference as well. Now, Jones's best attribute has always been his legs, his mobility. And you take that away or you minimize it now, and you're basically saying, okay, you got to win games now with your arm. Now all the flaws in his game are really popping through, and there's just no hiding them. So, again, I mentioned the lack of anticipation on the throws. I mentioned, taking forever to do his post-snap reads, holding onto the ball too long. And the other thing that, I almost sense, and I don't know if this is because it got drilled into his head under Joe Judge, but you almost get the impression that Daniel Jones is afraid to make a mistake. And because he's afraid to make a mistake, if that is indeed the case, he's holding on to the ball. He's making sure that what he is seeing is indeed what he is seeing. He's not leaving anything to chance. And I'm sorry, you just can't play the game if you're a quarterback that way. I'm not saying you be reckless or anything like that, but you have to have a certain degree of trust in your receivers. You have to have a certain degree of trust in the play call. And it's just not there. It's just not there. Now, some of the Jones supporters will say, well, his receivers have dropped over 20 passes. Yeah, that's part of the problem, but that's not the sole problem. It starts with the quarterback. All right. The 20 or so drop passes, that's a small part of the game. And every quarterback has dropped passes. All right. Even Patrick Mahomes has receivers who have dropped passes on him. Shouldn't be used as an excuse. It's not like, Daniel Jones is averaging, one drop pass for every 3 throws that he has. That's just not the case. So you look at all this stuff and the drop off from 2022 to 2024. And folks, it's alarming. And it's a big reason why you say to yourself that Daniel Jones's time with the Giants as their starting quarterback is likely coming to an end sooner than later. So it's unfortunate. Everybody was hoping that, it would work out. If it worked out, it would have meant that the team was winning, but you just can't be held back by the quarterback any longer. And I do think, and look, to be clear, Daniel Jones is not the only problem this team has this year, but he is a significant problem because if you can't move the ball, if you can't score, if you can't, win games, when you need to, when it's clutch time in the fourth quarter, then you really got to rethink what you're doing at the position. And I think that's where we're at now with the New York Giants. All right, coming up next, We're going to talk about the signs that have shown up all along that the Giants are maybe starting to separate themselves from Daniel Jones. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for those hard to get tickets to shows, concerts, and sporting events, look no further than to Game Time. Game Time makes finding the tickets you want faster and easier than ever and offers seats at competitive prices. With Game Time, there are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what you're paying for before you check out. You'll get clear images of your seat views, and you'll also get event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% off the difference. So go on and get the tickets you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Giant fans, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else gave me a bit of a Giants fan fuel this week? The Giants actually rose to number 8 in the draft order thanks to the Jets' big win Thursday night over the Houston Texans. That puts the Giants that much closer to being able to get their next franchise quarterback without having to trade up or give away the farm. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com to ship nationwide. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer. And don't forget, coming next week, all new episodes will have the takeaways from the Washington Commanders game, which is this Sunday. It's Giants host the Washington Commanders, looking to avoid their first sweep by the Commanders since 2021, also looking for their first home win of the 2024 season. Isn't that wild? We're now in November and the Giants still haven't won a game at home. That's just absolutely wild. But anyway, let's get back to the topic on hand, and that's Daniel Jones. And what have been some of the signs that it looks like the Giants are trying to separate from Daniel Jones? Now, look, before I go into it, I know Brian Daboll has said that Daniel Jones gives them the best chance to win, which, by the way, I think that's a rather telling statement as to the state of the quarterback room. That Daniel Jones, with all the flaws, with all the issues, is still the one that Daboll feels gives them the best chance to win. But there have been other signs that, I think if you look at them, they kind of indicate what maybe the true thoughts are about Daniel Jones. And I'll start with, the fact that on Monday night, after, that Pittsburgh game, that critical pass attempt in which Daniel Jones failed to call the right protection and TJ Watt came in and forced a fumble. He had a strip sack and a fumble recovery. Normally after that game, you would think the head coach would just say, look, we didn't have the right protection, or he would say, he would kind of gloss over it, not really point fingers as to who was at fault. What did Brian Daboll do? He basically pointed the finger at Daniel Jones and said, he was supposed to call for a chip there and he didn't. Illuminor was expecting help, didn't get it. Game over. All right. That's a little deviation from what Daboll has done in the past with other players, in that he has yet to point fingers at guys for messing up. Okay. You could chalk that up to him being honest. That's fine. But Daboll usually doesn't throw players under the bus like he did there. So that's one instance. Another instance is what if you look at Daboll's press conference transcript from this week, What have you seen from Daniel Jones? Basically, he talks about the work ethic. He talks about everything except the X's and O's, which I find kind of interesting. I guess you could chalk that up to you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And, you know, the work ethic is great. I mean, Daniel Jones is not unique to that. There are a lot of guys in that locker room that work their tail off. But when you can't find nice things to say about their play, you're being true to yourself there, and you're also being very telling in how you potentially feel about that player as a athlete. Then, you look at some of the questions that Dable's been asked in the past about other quarterbacks and how he just waxes on, glowingly about other guys. Most recently, Jaden Daniels. He spoke about Jaden Daniels and gave a lengthy answer about all the great things that Jaden Daniels of the Commanders is able to do. You don't really get that when you ask him about Daniel Jones. So again, is it because Dable prescribes to the if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all theory, which appears to be true? Is it because he's starting to separate himself from the quarterback? Is it because he just knows that Daniel Jones is on borrowed time? Only Dable can answer that. But there sure have been a lot of signs lately that the coaching staff, if the best they could say about Daniel Jones is that he's a hard worker, that, he pays attention to detail, that he's a leader, yada, 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 and they don't really have anything good to say about him as a signal caller, then, that to me is very, very telling. And look, we get, or at least I believe we're going to have Joe Shane after the Carolina game in Germany. So that would be during the bye week. Going to be very interesting to hear what Joe Shane has to say. Because look, Shane and Dable, for the most part, they're straight shooters. Shane a little bit more so than Dable. And I think what they say and what they don't say about Daniel Jones is quite telling. And, I think it's obvious that they're moving on. They absolutely are going to move on after this season. They're going to exercise that escape hatch that is in the contract that was put in there on purpose. And, it's unfortunate it hasn't worked out, but that's where things are headed for the Giants and Daniel Jones. Now, the next big question is, when is the right time to bench Daniel Jones? Because look, it's not a question of, if they're going to do it. I think they will. The question becomes, when are they going to do it? When does it make the best, the most sense for them to bench Daniel Jones? And I'm going to talk about that with you coming up next. Hey, Giant fans, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer. And when is the right time to bench Daniel Jones? Now, some of his harshest critics will say it should be this weekend. It should have been last weekend. It should have been at the start of the season. But look, as I've said before, Brian Dable has felt that Daniel Jones gives the team the best chance to win. And when he says that, he's not just saying that just for the heck of it. There's a little bit more involved here. And here's the situation. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that that is the belief of the head coach really speaks loudly to what they have behind Daniel Jones. I mean, if you remember, the objective in the offseason for Joe Shane was to get a quarterback, a backup quarterback in here who could potentially win games for them. So by saying, look, we're going to stick with Daniel Jones, are they really saying that, well, we're not so sure that we can win games with Drew Lock? And if that's what they think, then, oh my gosh, did they swing and miss on the backup? All right. But here's the other thing. Dable has to be careful about the message he sends to the locker room. If he pulls Daniel Jones out now for the Commanders game, what is he telling all the players in the locker room? That basically he's throwing in the towel on the season. That, yeah, mathematically we're still alive for a playoff hunt, but I can't stand to run Daniel Jones out there another week. So, I'm going to pull him. You just can't do that. And I get it. The injury guarantee is staring them in the face. And every time they put Daniel Jones out there, every time he runs or takes a hit or whatever, you sit there, if you're Joe Shane and the Giants, and you kind of pray that he gets up and he doesn't suffer any kind of injury. But, the Giants, I think what Dable in part is trying to do, everybody knows about that injury guarantee. I mean, every time you look, somebody's talking about it, somebody's writing about it. Everybody knows it. The players can't escape it. So I think what Dable is trying to do when he says Daniel gives him the best chance to win is he's trying to say, look, we know about the money. We're aware of that. But we're not going to throw in the towel on the season. We're not going to sit here and worry about the money. We're worried about winning today. You guys go through the week, you prepare, you put your bodies on the line. We're going to give you every best opportunity we can for you guys to win. Now, again, the skeptics will say Daniel doesn't give them the best chance to win because it's kind of evolved that way after halfway through the season. But, the counter argument is Daniel Jones is not solely to blame for the Giants record being what it is. It's just not, whether we want to admit it or not. So here's what I think is going to happen regarding a potential benching, because I do think it's happening this year. I just don't think it's going to happen as soon as people think it might be. I think if you're the Giants, what you do is you go through Sunday's game with the Commanders. And if you win that game, you would like to think that you're going to beat the Carolina Panthers in Germany. So if you win those next two games, now you have 4 wins. So now the season looks a little bit better, as opposed to if you lose these next 2 games, or let's stick with this game. If you lose this next game, you fall to 2-7. Lose this game and then go on and lose to the Panthers in Germany, then you're falling to what? 2-8. At that point, there's no coming back from that. So if the Giants do lose to the Commanders this week, and there's a chance they could, they're actually the underdog. You don't make the change on a short work week having to go overseas to Germany. You just don't. The time to make the change, if you're going to do it, is to ideally do it after the bye week, or during the bye week, I should say. Get the new quarterback, whether it's Drew Lock, whether it's Tommy DeVito, whether it's somebody who isn't on the roster yet, who knows? You give that person a chance to have the maximum amount of time to get into the playbook. All right? Because again, if you drop these next 2 games, your season's over. Mathematically, they're still in it. They win these next 2, like I said, the record suddenly goes from 2-6 to 4-6, which is a lot better. All right. So that's why I don't think the Giants have made that move yet with Daniel Jones. And who knows, if they do win these next 2 and they suddenly get hot, maybe they don't bench Daniel Jones. I don't know that that's going to happen. But if you're going to make the change, you make the change. Like I said, you make that change after the bye week, or after this next game against the Panthers in Germany. During the bye, you give the new quarterback an opportunity to get acclimated. You tweak the playbook however you need to tweak it, and you just move forward. Because, at that point, you've got to send a message to the locker room that you've done everything possible to make it work with Jones. You want to win some games. You don't want to keep going down this same path over and over and over. So that's how I kind of see this playing out. We'll see if the Giants agree. And of course, we'll see how the next 2 weeks go because anything can happen. And who knows? Maybe the Giants do go on a run. Maybe we'll have some good news to talk about starting this Monday. Hopefully, the Giants win and avoid the sweep by the Washington Commanders. Would be the first sweep of the season series since 2021. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to keep it here next week. Monday, I will have takeaways on the Giants game against the Washington Commanders. And of course, we'll have shows all next week for you. So until then, have a great weekend and I'll see you on Monday.